Hello and welcome. Today we are diving deep into what makes learning actually work. We're talking about the critical connection between objectives, assessment, and instruction. And to really get why this is so important, let's kick things off with a little thought experiment. Seriously, picture it. You've got all the best materials right there, the wood, the nails, the concrete, but you have no blueprint, not a single drawing. Where would you even start? What are you even trying to build? You know it's just going to be a total mess, right? Yeah, you'd end up with some kind of structure, but it would be completely unstable. And here's the real kicker. You'd have absolutely no way to know if you did a good job because you never even defined what finished was supposed to look like. Well, believe it or not, this exact same problem can happen in a classroom. But don't worry, there's a fix. And that fix, that solution, is having a crystal clear blueprint for learning. In the world of education, we call these blueprints instructional objectives, and they are, without a doubt, the absolute starting point for any lesson that's going to be effective. So, what are they, really? Well, way back in 1956, a foundational text defined them like this. Now, I know, that sounds a little academic, but the idea behind it is super simple. Objectives just state, very clearly, what we want students to walk away with. They're the goal, the whole point of the lesson. And this is where their real magic lies. They work for everyone involved. For a teacher, objectives guide every single choice you make, what activities you plan, what materials you're going to use, and how you'll know if you succeeded. And for the student, well, they answer that huge question, what am I actually supposed to be learning here? It just makes everything clear and purposeful. Okay, so we know we need a blueprint. Awesome. But how do you write a good one? Well, one of the best tools out there for this is called the COOD framework. It helps you break down any learning goal into 3 really clear parts: what students need to know, what they need to understand, and what they need to be able to do. So let's start with know. This is basically the stuff of the lesson. The essential bits of information, key vocabulary words, important names and dates, maybe a specific formula. These are the concrete building blocks of knowledge that students just have to have. Then we get to understand. This is where we go from what to so what. Understandings are those big ideas, the core concepts, the aha moments that we really want to stick. They answer the question, why do these facts even matter? This is the stuff that students will carry with them long after they've forgotten the little details. And finally, we've got do. This is all about action. What can a student actually do to prove they've got it? These objectives are all about using action verbs because they're things we can see, things we can measure. It's the proof in the pudding. Let's make this real with an example. Check this out. For a science unit on butterflies, a no objective would be listing the stages of the life cycle: egg, larva, pupa, adult. Simple. The understand objective is the big idea behind it all, that life cycles are a pattern that ensures a species survives. And the do objective? That's the skill. Can you create a diagram that actually shows the process? See how they all work together? Now, teachers aren't just pulling these objectives out of thin air. They have a starting point, those big educational standards from the state or their district. The real craft, the real art, is in translating those broad statements into a specific blueprint that you can actually use in a classroom. Think about it. A state standard might be really vague, something like, students will understand literary texts. Okay, great, but what does that mean? That's the destination, not the map. A teacher's job is to turn that into a sharp COOD objective, like students will be able to do this, analyze a story to identify the main theme and support it with 3 pieces of evidence. One is a wish, the other is a plan. And that translation process usually follows 3 pretty clear steps. First, you really dig in and analyze that standard. Then you break it down, asking yourself, okay, to meet this standard, what do my students need to know, understand, and be able to do? And finally, you rewrite all that into clear, simple language that your students can actually get behind. Now, if we want to get even more precise with our blueprints, we can add another layer to our thinking, the domains of learning. This just helps us be really specific about the kind of learning we're aiming for. Are we talking about thinking, doing, or feeling? So first you have the cognitive domain, which is all about intellectual skills. That's the head. Then there's the psychomotor domain, which involves physical skills. Think of this as the hands. And finally, the affective domain, which deals with our values and attitudes. That's the heart. Thinking about all 3 helps make sure our lessons are well-rounded, teaching not just facts, but also practical skills and important values. So, you've done it. You've used COODS and the 3 domains to design the perfect blueprint. But here's the thing. A blueprint is totally useless if the construction crew decides to ignore it. And this brings us to what might be the most important idea of all, instructional alignment. Let's go right back to our house metaphor. Imagine your blueprint clearly calls for 3 bedrooms, but the construction crew only builds 2. And then the inspector shows up, but they're only checking the plumbing. The whole project is a failure, right? Everything has to be perfectly in sync. And it is the exact same thing in teaching. It's really this simple, but incredibly powerful. Our objectives are the blueprint. They define what we're building. Our instruction is the construction. That's how we're actually going to build it. And our assessment is the inspection. That's how we check our work against the original plan. If any one of these is out of alignment, the whole thing just falls apart. The source material we're looking at really nails it with this quote. The key word here is congruence. It just means everything fits together perfectly. Everything is working towards the exact same goal. Your final test has to measure the exact skill your objective laid out, and your daily lessons have to teach the exact things that are going to be on that test. No surprises. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that final piece of the puzzle, the inspection, or as we call it, assessment. How do we make sure our blueprint was actually built correctly? Well, there are 2 main ways we inspect the work. Formative assessments are like the in-progress checks. They're the little check-ins you do during construction. You know, like making sure a wall is perfectly level. They give you feedback so you can make adjustments as you go. Summative assessments, on the other hand, are the final inspection. That's the big test at the end, the final paper. It tells you if you successfully met the objective. You absolutely need both to get a quality result. And all of this brings us to one final really important question. Whether you're an educator, a student, or just curious about how we learn, this is what it all comes down to. Without that clear blueprint, without those well-defined, perfectly aligned objectives, are we actually building something strong and meaningful, or are we just kind of throwing materials together and hoping for the best? Thanks so much for tuning in. We've put our sources on the screen here in case you want to dig a little deeper and get better at building your own learning blueprints. We'll see you next time.